Hi, Gary Stearman coming to you from the Prophecy Watchers studio. In studio with me today is author and lecturer and, by the way, Israel guide, Doug Hershey. Doug, welcome to Prophecy Watchers.
Thanks for having me.
We brought Doug here to do some programming with us, but I just wanted to introduce him to you today because he's a fascinating guy and he's put together this book, Israel Rising, and the concept of the book is, I think, one of the best presentations of Israel I've ever seen. Tell us about the book a little bit.
Well, the book started with me obtaining over 2,200 old photos that were taken between the 1880s and the 1940s, which was all over what was then the British Mandate of Palestine and even back to through the Ottoman Empire. And we shrunk that down to only about 100 photos and went back to those exact photo locations, or as close as we possibly could get, to reshoot the exact same photos to show how much that the land has revived under Israeli sovereignty. And so with that, then, it's tied into Ezekiel 36, when God speaks to Ezekiel to prophesy to the land, and basically that when Israel is out of the land will be a desolate wasteland, and when the Jewish people return, everything will explode, and there's lots of history in there kind of verifying the last 2,000 years of what the land looked like.
Let's talk about a question that we hear from time to time, and here's the question. Is Israel legitimately back in the land today? Are the people who are there really the 12 tribes? Mm-hmm. Are they really there by the call of God, by the grace of God? In other words, is Bible prophecy being fulfilled? And that's a question that some people would argue against. There are some out there who say, oh, those are not the real Jews who are going into the real kingdom.
Yeah.
And you've probably heard this argument.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the amount of time that I spend in the land, I'm the more that I'm there, the more I read Bible prophecy very literally and very tangibly. Is that it's not an allegory, it's not a spiritual exegesis on whatever. It's God actually meant what He said, and He sent what He meant.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to Bible prophecy and detractors and saying, well, maybe this means that, it's like, well, it's difficult to argue those things when you can see the vineyards that Jeremiah said would be replanted and now that they are in the last 20 years. Or let's have some of those discussions about whether God is done with Israel while we're having coffee in a city that's been rebuilt just exactly the way that God said it would happen, or when we're walking through the some of the fields and the orchards that are literally blooming in the desert right now. I mean, there's so much that's tangibly happening that is happening exactly as the Bible said that it would.
Well, Israel shall blossom like a rose. They grow roses.
No doubt about it.
So we've seen at least a partial fulfillment of the latter-day prophecy.
For sure.
Now, and you take tour groups through Israel, and you look at the land through eyes that I suppose most of us will never really be able to duplicate because we just don't spend as much time as you do. But you have condensed into your book a kind of a vision that we can all share, which I just think is phenomenal.
Yeah, and whether you've been to the land or not, to me, what the book represents and what you're certainly well versed in is the fact is that we're living in Bible times right now. Sometimes trips will go to Israel and they'll look at, let's talk about Bible times 2,000 years ago. But the fact is that there's prophecies from Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Isaiah, Hosea, Amos. I mean, pick a prophet. There's prophecies that are coming to pass in the last 40 to 50 years that have been lying dormant for 2,600 years. This is the time that the prophets talked about, and it's happening in our lifetime. And so when we're in Israel, when we're taking groups, and much of what the book is pointing to is that God is faithful for thousands and thousands of years over a particular piece of land, over a particular people group, and He says He's going to cause the land to revive, and He's going to make it like a Garden of Eden again, so that all the nations of the earth will look and know that He is the Lord. So He's always been using Israel as a signpost of saying, I'm going to do something unique in here to bless the rest of the world. We're living in a time and a season where the land is reviving, the people are returning, Jerusalem is being strengthened, the nation is beginning to live in security in a way that it never has in thousands of years. Yeah. And it's unfolding exactly as God said that He would do it.
There are places in Israel that bring tears to your eyes. I remember on our last trip, we went to Bethel, and the place where Abraham stood, and,
Yes.
and God made a promise to him.
Yeah.
And near where we were, God said to Abraham, look to the north, south, east, and west, and everything you see is yours.
Yeah.
And to stand in that same ground.
I know that hill.
You know that hill.
I do. I've been there many times.
You've been there many times, but isn't there something super special about that? When you,
Again, I mean, everything comes back to God's faithfulness. When God makes a promise, regardless of even what he's promising, it comes down to, can he be trusted or not? Will he do exactly what he says, or will there be some fine print that I didn't read or understand or something
Yeah.
like that in his, God means what he says and he says what he means. If he says that I'm giving you this land forever because I want you to have it and I made a promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, can he be trusted or not? And the fact is he can, and he's demonstrating that he can right now.
I wanted to mention Zechariah 12, the burden of the word of the Lord for Israel. And the second verse says, behold, I'll make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about when they shall be in siege, both against Judah and against Jerusalem. In other words, God has called him back, but this will not go uncontested. And of course, we see this in the news. Many of us read the news from Israel every day.
For sure.
Because it's so important. But there is a contest for Jerusalem.
Yeah, and the ironic thing is that it's all based on the Jewish people returning to the land. 100 years ago, nobody cared about Jerusalem. It was a ramshackle little town, and again, in the book, I have photos, dating back to the late 1800s. Mark Twain talks about how when he went through in 1867, he talks about how that Jerusalem is so small you can walk around the entire city in an hour. Like, that's how small it was.
Now, you won't be able to see this, but I'm holding his book open because on the left, you see a picture that was taken decades ago. On the right, from the same spot, you have a picture that's taken today.
And that picture there in particular is from Shiloh, where the ark sat for 369 years.
And by the way, I've been there, and it's awe-inspiring.
Yeah, it's amazing. There's lots of places that are argued about well, maybe it happened here, or maybe it happened there. Shiloh is a place where there's a plateau that fits the exact dimensions of the Ark of the Covenant or the tabernacle, and that's the spot.
There it is.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, and so what he's done is do a whole book of comparisons, maybe 100 years ago and today. He stood in the same place as the photographer did 100 years ago, if possible, if the place was still there.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it was very difficult to locate that exact spot.
Well, it was. And so part of the challenge of recreating some of these photos is that the premise of the book is that when Israel's back in the land revives, everything is growing, the cities are being rebuilt. So there were some times where we would find the exact spot, but we couldn't see the same landscape because there was so much trees or vegetation, or there were orchards, or there were buildings, or the cityscape. So we tried to get as close as we could, and it was sort of frustrating at the time, but at the same time, it's like, well, that's the whole point of the book, is that so much has changed and grown, we can't even get to some of the same angles because of the amount of growth in such a short amount of time.
You take people through Israel all the time.
I do.
And give us a little gauge of their average reaction. How do people react when they walk through these places?
Listen, I mean, it's as you well know, the land will speak for itself. I mean, it's hard to not have a positive experience when your Bible is open walking through the land. But one of the most profound things is that you begin reading your Bible like in color. It's like going from black and white to color. The Bible comes alive. You'll never read it the same way again. But even more profound to me, and a lot of the groups that we spend a lot of time talking about these very things, is that instead of thinking of Bible times as 2,000 years ago when Jesus walked the earth, the fact is that we're living in Bible times right now. The most repeated promise in the Scriptures is that God will return his people back to the land, and he's doing it. And furthermore, we talk with our groups of that anytime that God brings his people back to the land, it's through the help of Gentile hands. When the Israelites are coming out of Egypt, they ask the Egyptians for silver and gold. When they're coming out of Babylon, The Persian king says, anything that you need, let us know. If you have everything you need, if you need anything else, let us know and we'll cover it. And Isaiah, Jeremiah, they talk about that the Gentile nations will bring their sons and bring your sons and daughters on their shoulders. The ships of Tarshish will bring silver and gold to restore the fortunes of Israel and Judah. Talks about foreigners will be your vine dressers and care for your flocks. And it's always by the help of Gentile hands. It's happening right now, and we can be a part of it.
Doug Hershey, author, lecturer, tour guide to Israel, someone who is absolutely convinced that prophecy is being fulfilled before our very eyes. Doug, thanks for coming by. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
And you will want to look at his book, Israel Rising. I'm Gary Stearman. Hey, you keep watching. We are. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com, where you can sign up for our free email newsletter, or follow us at facebook.com/prophecywatchers. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.